Hello and welcome to Property Mastermind Podcast, episode 195. Today we're talking property development insights you must know. Bob and I are going to unpack the recent masterclass that we had over the weekend. We are going to make sure you are aware of the key things you must know to do successful property development. Let's jump on in. Hello, welcome to episode 195, Property Mastermind Podcast with Hilary, Saxton and Bob Andersen. Hey, Bob, welcome.
Thanks. Great to be back.
We're back. It's been a couple of weeks. We did a bit of batching, didn't we?
We did.
So it's been a while since we've jumped back on the behind the mics. We're getting better at it. Well, we're not bad behind the mics. We just struggle with the cameras.
Struggle with cameras.
We do. Hey, Bob, before we kick off into this week's episode, which is the recap of the masterclass and just some key insights that we often talk about in our everyday lives, I'm going to give the book away this week. The book, Brett Hode. Brett, in the post for you. Brett has jumped on board and he is about to do something life-changing. So, Brett, this is coming in the mail to you and we look forward to working with you and leading you through the same success that the person you were inspired to jump in with us because you had coffee with them. So we know that you're going to have a great journey. Okay, Bob, what's your tip for the week?
Tip for the week, read more books.
That's it, read more books. Yeah, you're right.
You read any good ones lately, Hilary?
Well,
because you listen to books more than read books.
Yes, I listen to books. The last book I read was actually one on corporate culture. That's the book that I physically read. But I'm listening to a few right now. I'm doing a reread of 10X is better than 2X. And interestingly enough, when I was speaking to somebody last week that listens to the podcast, they said that they listened to it and it was a game changer for them and it was a reason why they moved forward on something. So it's a pretty exciting book. 10X is better than 2X. So I've recommended it to numerous people. That would be my go. Anyway, Bob, I want to kick off this podcast because I know we've got some great things to cover. I want to talk about, well, firstly, I want to thank people for coming along and spending time at the masterclass. But I really want to unpack the key insights that you probably have when putting together an event like that. So for the people that came along, the format for the masterclass, we did it differently to normal. Normally we would run it as a free event and Bob goes through the property development process. That we break that down to 9 steps. And then we talk about a couple of products that we have, like our bundle or our mentoring program, and then offer you an opportunity to join us. But we do give great content and the stay on rate is 100%. So we know that it's gold what you're listening to. And we also cover off on a couple of creative strategies. How many do we do in the regular masterclass, Bob?
4.
4. So this time we changed it up and we went through the process, the 9-step process. We went through 2 of the more commonly used creative strategies. And then we applied the process to a property development that was recently completed and went right through. The feedback on that was phenomenal because it showed how you apply each step and how it was applied with photos, with documents, with time, with money, all of that stuff was covered. So it was very useful and the feedback on that was great, Bob.
Yep.
So I really want you to talk about, from that masterclass that we just had, what were the biggest takeaways that you hope people got when they actually came along and spent that 3.5 hours on the masterclass? What was the biggest takeaways you would hope that people got?
Well, a range of people would have come to that. It's people who knew very little about property development and therefore the 9 steps were all new to them. But for some others, maybe haven't quite done a project yet, but maybe you've done a little bit of research. I think filling in the gaps. There's a lot of moving parts to doing a property development and you really can't afford to skip them. You can't do every second step. And I think those little bits of fill in, those bits of information that the missing, what I call a light bulb moment where people, that's the bit that's the bit between these two bits, and so we're able to go through in fairly good detail, and particularly when we applied that knowledge, if you like, the theoretical knowledge, to a real project that, as you say, it's just completed. I think, that filled in a lot of gaps for people, and I think that was a big takeaway for a lot of people, was filling in those little gaps.
Yeah, I think for me, Bob, hearing you say that, and that's really something that I hear often, even at a workshop, there are knowledge gaps filled in. I think that a lot of people, they've been a property investor, or maybe they're a real estate agent, or maybe they're a builder, or maybe they've run a business where they grow something, or grow a business, or they understand finance. We often have people that have that sort of background that come in, and I always say to people, there will be bits which you want, because you don't want to have to learn absolutely everything. There's too many moving parts, but there are a lot of knowledge gaps, and I think that's gold, what you've just said, that people know stuff, but they don't know all of those moving parts. And when it comes to property development, there is the potential to do it well and make a lot of money, but there is that potential to just think you can wing it.
No,
and you'll be right. And we often talk about that. Sometimes you can wing it for maybe one project if you're lucky, but eventually you'll get caught, shall we say, with your pants down. And knowledge gaps are really massive. The other thing, Bob, you talked about at the start is property development not being for everybody. Do you want to unpack what that meant?
Yeah, true. If we just accept that do it well, you'll make good money. But do you have to be a property developer to make good money out of property development? And the answer is no. And for some people, they don't want to be a property developer. They don't have the time. They don't want to apply them, the knowledge that you need. And so they can become an investor. In fact, it's possible for an investor to invest in somebody's property development and make as much out of it as the property developer. So they're putting in the money, if you like, and the property developer's doing the work. So, yeah, look, it's not for everybody. And for some people, as you know, because you handle a lot of the investors, well, just about all the investors in our own projects, there's people who just want to invest and make money out of property development, not necessarily do it. Although the whole masterclass was targeted to people who want to learn how to be a developer.
As you know, I field most of the phone calls, a lot of them. And I recently spoke to a young guy, and he had a substantial amount of money. We're talking substantial, well over $1 million available to do a property development. And for a lot of people, that's a huge amount to get started with. That puts him well in the range of $5 million GRV potentially, but he even had more than that. So the conversation I had with him was he just had baby number 4, and he was working, and mum's at home, and it's quite a stressful and busy time for them. And he said to me, even though he'd rung to talk to me about going in the mentoring program, we ended up with the decision of maybe not now, and maybe he would invest in somebody else's project. So I can see why we never know somebody's timing. And that's even recently in our Q&A, we had a conversation about people selling their properties and somebody else was buying one, and you just never know somebody's reason for selling. And that's the same as somebody wanting to be a developer. You never know somebody's reason for wanting to. And yeah, I think you're right. That's a big takeaway. Some people just don't have the apple, or it's just not the right time.
Yeah. And so that was something I draw people's attention to, although pretty well everybody on the masterclass, well, I'd say a majority want to look at property development. Potentially some have already got their toes in the water, as we know. But yeah, it's being a developer is not the only way to make money out of property development. Investors can do very well too.
Yeah. Another key takeaway, Bob, which was sort of became apparent when we got onto the last section, showing how the process fitted in and what actually happened. The takeaway for me in that point was that we assumed everything had been done. And I know we've talked about this maybe on our Q&As or at other points. I'm not sure if on the podcast, but we had assumed that everything was done for handover and that the staging was correct in the property and that, we thought, yep, done. Then I get there on the day and I'm thinking, hang on, this hasn't had the final clean. The stages are here. This is an absolute nightmare. So I think that there is an assumption sometimes that things have been done because that's that particular person's job. And, we were talking, it was actually the builder's job, but the builder had been sick. And we didn't know. And so one little thing got missed, which was the clean. And then the stages turned up and it had to be managed. But I think the takeaway there, the insight is for people listening, don't assume that things are necessarily done. You have to check that they are, because that was our responsibility to check that. And we didn't. I'm glad I caught it. I happened to be there. And it wasn't a major, but you want to display when you're staging, you want the most beautiful product available. So it sells. And the proof was in the pudding. It sold on the first open home. But yeah, that was another insight. But what about the next insight being around commercial finance? Unpack that one, because this is always the one that blows people out of the water.
Yeah, particularly if people are only used to finance in respect to their house. So they understand what a home loan is. A lot of people have bought a house. People have financed an investment property. Pretty much the same sort of finance, really, from a standard bank typically, but not always. And two big things that you need with normal finance, a deposit and serviceability. So you have to prove out of your income that you can pay the interest, maybe for 20 years. So that's normal finance. And most people, that's the finance that they understand. Property development is quite different, particularly in the world of what we call commercial finance. So a normal bank finance for a normal loan, we just call that resi finance or retail finance. With property development, though, there's one big difference with commercial finance. Then there's a number of small differences, but one big difference is that the interest, where normally you have to prove serviceability, here with a commercial loan, the interest is what we call capitalised. So what happens is that the financier lends you the interest as part of your loan. And so you don't have to prove that you can come up with that interest out of your income, because you hardly ever will when you're doing a property development. Imagine doing, even 4 townhouses. There'd be a lot of interest along the way that, although for only a short period of time,
people would die.
You'd have to have, I don't know what you'd have to earn, way too much. So that's a great thing. And a lot of people don't realise that because they think, I can't borrow any more money. They've been told by their bank, let's say, you can't borrow anymore because you got your house mortgage and you got an investment property or two. And they think, well, how am I going to do a property development? Well, the point is you're not using that type of finance. And that's a real eye-opener for people. And some people have been held back from doing something in property development because they didn't understand that. They didn't understand it's a different type of finance. And that serviceability issue isn't really an issue.
I think that's probably the big takeaway that most people kind of, if you're listening to us for the first time or you're very new to this podcast and you hear that, because we do talk about it a lot, and it's the one where people are like, what?
How long has this been going on?
That's only a rule if you're not involved. How could I not have known about this? It is something that's pretty massive when you realise that, they give you the interest that you pay them. It's fabulous. So, Bob, they are sort of some of the big ones that people, insights that people should know. I wanted to talk about events because that was an online event, and we're all about relationships, and relationships matter. So I want to take this to when we have a live event. What's your big takeaway on attending like our 3-day workshop, which is September, and here's a shameless plug, 19, 20, 21 of September. But what do you see as the big holy moly, apart from the fact that it's a fabulous event? I know you love doing them. You've done about 80 now. But what's the big thing, the insight that you see from attending something like that?
I think it's the interaction of people. That's a big thing. The masterclass was great, but people would be sitting at home in their lounge or wherever watching it. And that's cool. It's nice and relaxed. Saturday morning, let's do that. I'm up there jumping around in front of basically a television set with a PowerPoint presentation and talking about everything. And that's fun. I enjoy doing that. But I think a live event, particularly like our workshop, we get quite a lot of people along, but they're all similar in that property development is what they want to do, and in many cases, what they are doing. And so you get that real energy, the vibe, the interaction between people making new friends. It's just that whole energy. 3 days, and you think it'd be exhausting, but I'm pumped so much at the end of it.
I totally believe that. It's the people. Everyone's exactly the same. And that's what I tell people. You are like everybody else there. Everyone's the same. They all want to do property development, and you're going to meet your twin. Your twin will be there. Same age, same job, same sex, same everything. You'll meet somebody just like you. Everyone's so similar. But I think for me, what I notice is the relationships that continue afterward. I've recently found out one of our mentoring students has hired, I don't know if I've told you this, Bob, has hired one of the guys he met at the workshop last year as his project manager. Did you know that?
No.
Oh, yeah,
that's incredible.
That's happened just recently.
So met him at the workshop.
They got chatting at morning tea for a short amount of time. I can't believe I forgot to tell you, just for a short amount of time. And then they swap numbers, and because they're both in the same state, they're not too far from each other. They went and met for coffee, and he brought him on board just to help him sort of get things tidied in the office. I think before long, he realised for him to grow the way he wants to grow, he's hired him, and he's now his project manager. So there are relationships that move forward. There's also a lot of joint ventures that happen there too, as in people find money partners, or people decide to do things together, to connect together. So whether that's at the Property Mastermind event or any property event, it's a great opportunity, isn't it, Bob?
Yeah, and I think there's been a few long-term relationships formed there as well,
yes,
of a more romantic type.
Yes, well, there you go.
So something for everybody.
Some people even got married, didn't they? Yeah, you've had people get married from your workshop. Said you don't.
Not at the workshop.
No, definitely not at the workshop. So, Bob, we went from the 9-step process to 2 joint ventures. Now, normally you'll cover 4. Which 2 did you cover, and what made you choose those 2?
So I chose the 2 most common, most popular ones that were what we call a joint venture with an equity partner. In other words, a joint venture with somebody with money, and a joint venture with a landowner, which is a type of joint venture with somebody who owns a land that could be developed. And they're 2 great types of joint venture where, as a developer, you can do a development with little money or even no money of your own once you understand how to do that.
And there's a key there. Once you understand how, that is one thing. Let's unpack that whole joint venture thing with somebody. I think what people don't realise, and here's another key insight, is that you have to really know what you're doing. You have to be able to articulate, you've got to be professional, and you have to understand it, because you're selling the idea of an opportunity for somebody to join you. But if you don't get it right, or if you don't do that well, then it's not good. So which 2 creative strategies did you choose, Bob, and why were they the 2 that you chose?
Well, I chose the 2 most popular ones, Hilary, which are joint venture with an equity partner and a joint venture with a land partner. Similar but different.
Landowner, land partner?
Sorry, let's say landowner. Good correction, well done.
So what are you doing? Where have you been? No. Yeah. So joint venture with an equity partner?
Yep. So some people might call that a money partner. So this is somebody who their role is to put in the equity, and the other person's role, the developer, is to do the project. That's the most common one of all that people use. That's a simple joint venture, because, as I explained, to do a property development, you need expertise and you need money. And so if one partner has expertise but not money, the other one has money and not expertise, then when they come together, you've got a property development. And so that's very popular. The other one, joint venture with a landowner.
Well done.
Got it right, thanks. Is where somebody owns a parcel of land that has development potential, but they don't have any knowledge. They don't know how to develop it. Now, they've got 2 choices. They could just sell it, which is what most people do, and they get whatever it's worth. Or they could join up with a developer and develop it. And their role is where the equity partner put the money in, this time the landowner puts the land in. So when we're talking about finance, we're talking about putting in equity, money from our side, and then the financier puts in the rest. They put in the most money. Well, it doesn't have to be cash. This is the difference. So most people do put in cash as a deposit, as equity. They put cash in, but you could put property in as well, as long as that property doesn't have too much debt on it. So when you're putting equity into a development, yeah, most of the time it is cash, but it could also be land. And that's where this one works as well. So in both of these examples, the developer does the work and gets a good chunk of the profit. The other partner, either the landowner or the equity partner putting in the cash, they get a good chunk of the profit as well. And so they're the two most popular ways. Certainly the equity partner is the most popular, the most common one. But the other one works really well. So I had to put it in there.
Yeah, it's great. We've actually got a particular mentoring student right now doing one of those. And we've got another one.
The landowner?
Joint venture with a landowner. Yeah. Most of the mentoring students are using some sort of creative strategy. And then we've also got another one thinking pretty seriously about it. So don't underestimate the potential and opportunities available when you know a little bit more about the different creative strategies. And as you said, you went through 2 of them. And there are, numerous more. In fact, we did 2 full days on them last year. But the takeaway or the important thing to know when it comes to those, Bob, when it comes to creative strategies, what would you say the number one takeaway, whether that be joint venture with a landowner, whether it be equity partner, a loan partner, whether someone's just loaning you money, whether they're going to share in the profit with you, whatever the strategy is, what do you believe a developer needs to have as the number one point in their mind, or what's the most important thing when it comes to joint ventures of any type?
Well, you're talking about 2 people, and sometimes they might know each other very well, but sometimes they don't. And so when you've got 2 people and you've got a lot of money involved, property development, you've got 6-figure amounts of money, there has to be an element of trust. It doesn't matter how good a deal is. Let's say you're a developer, you've got a great deal. It doesn't matter how good a deal is. If the other party with the money just doesn't trust you for whatever reason, that deal's not going to happen. And trust isn't important, but also equally as important is...
Sorry, did you say trust isn't...
Trust is very important.
Yeah, very. Okay.
Very important.
Yep.
But also very important is to look professional. As a developer, you're asking somebody, you may know them or you may not, you're asking them to put up quite a substantial amount of money into a project that you're saying is a really good project and you'll make a lot of money out of it. So, yeah, that's the trust elements there. But you have to look professional.
You have to be professional, Bob, not just look. Like you have to be professional when you're asking for somebody to join you. That's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, well, look professional, be professional. I mean, you could be professional and not look it. That wouldn't work.
Somebody at your caliber would probably get away from that. Yeah, get away with that.
Mind you, I'm thinking of one of our mentoring students at the moment who is very good at property development.
And we're talking about Ross.
Yep.
Ross is coming on at some point soon. Yes. Doesn't look professional at all, but he is very knowledgeable. He's done he went through the mentoring program. He understands property development from start to finish. He's got experience. And when you're at that level, it's a little bit different. I'm thinking for people getting started that are wanting to use loan partners or equity partners, I think there is the looking professional, yes, and they have to understand. They have to know what they're doing. And even, we go as far as helping people pretty much script out what they need to say to practice it. But people have to know. You have to be competent and confident to be able to articulate what you need to say, so people are like, yeah, I'm keen to do that. Otherwise, they'll be flaky. They'll say they'll join you. They'll pull out. They won't take you seriously, or they just won't join you. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I agree totally. And we've seen examples of that. But in our mentoring program, and I know you tend to guide people through this. So we have people in the program who need an investor. They know that when they come in. Okay, I've got some money, haven't got enough. I need an investor. And so you guide them often and you make them professional. You tell them what they have to do, what they have to be like. And you've got to learn. You've got to learn quite a few things. You've got to learn about finance, about the structure, like the technical side of it, not just look the goods, if you like, but you need to understand structure and finance and how to do an information memorandum, for instance. And that's important. But
I think it's that awareness. They need to understand what they're talking about as well. And even just all the way down to the I's and T's, you have to understand what you're talking about. Otherwise, people won't trust you.
No,
unless, of course, you're Ross.
Well, Ross, yeah. But, that's an education in itself, how to do that. There's more to property development than just how to put the nuts and bolts together, particularly, if you're looking at using one of those strategies.
Interestingly, Bob, one of the questions that came up was, how can I leverage partnerships to grow faster? And the answer to that is know what you're talking about. You've got to know what you're talking about, because as we alluded to earlier, you'll only be lucky for so long and then luck runs out. So you've just really got to know what you're doing and know what you're talking about, I's and T's, and really have that paperwork done properly, written. It's got to be done legally and properly at all times. Otherwise, the wheels come off. Everything gets built pear-shaped real quick, and that's not fun. So, Bob, another question that comes up is, how do I know when it's time for me to do property development? And this is it's a bit of an insight for those people thinking about property development. When is the right time? When should I do it? What's your answer? Because it was interesting. I spoke to somebody today who actually rang and we had a good chat. And I said, I feel like I've spoken to you before. He said, yeah, we did, Hilary. We spoke a year ago. And you said to me, it's not your time yet. And I couldn't believe that I'm trying to remember the conversation I'd had, and I have reflected back now. I realised why. There was just too much happening, as in too tied up with property developments. We're too tied up with investments, and it was just too hamstrung, had not enough to get started, and had a few other things going on. But what's your advice to when is the right time for me to do property development? Not me. The person listening.
Yeah, too late for you.
Yeah.
Too late for me. I think you just know. Like we know there's prerequisites. Get yourself educated. That's really important. But let me put a different spin on it. Don't wait for everything to be perfect, because it'll never happen. What do you say? Better to be, what is it, 80%? I can never remember what you say. Than
80% done is better than 100% not started.
Yeah.
I think I'm going more on the lines of, it's a decision, and what our brain does when we make a decision is it makes it right. So the faster you want to make money and have the lifestyle that you want means the faster you need to do it. I know I asked you that question, but it's really easy to make excuses. I know that from what I do.
The difference between a reason and an excuse is?
Nothing. Yeah, they're exactly the same thing. It's just the way you see them. Yeah. So I suppose, Bob, I think I've gone through everything I wanted to do. I think in the next podcast, I'd like to look at mitigating risk right through the whole property development process. So I'd like to unpack the 9-step process and look at the risks involved, so people understand what you're looking for. And so people wanting to do property development just realise, where you need to. We use the word risk, which is quite a scary word. I think a better word to use would be potential problems that you might come up against that you need to be ready for or make sure aren't going to happen. So that would be the next one. I think we'll leave this one here. Any sort of final points that you'd like to say before I close off this week's podcast, Bob?
Oh, putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
Well, I'll choose an old saying. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Second best time is now. And I think that's, when it comes to making your mind up with property development, it's now. It's certainly not in 5 years' time or 20 years' time. So get yourself educated, get in, and just make it happen. You will.
I suppose if you're interested in hearing how other people have moved forward, listen to the interviews that we've got with with mentoring students that have just loved their journey and recommend us to others. But anyway, if you're interested in learning about financial feasibilities, Bob, we've got a free lunchtime session that you're hosting on the 22nd of April. You'll be looking at me like, am I? Yes, you are.
No, I know.
Yeah, you do. You've been told. Oh, you've been put in your calendar. So for anybody interested, there'll be a link below and you can sign up for that. So it goes for 45 minutes. And yeah, April the 22nd. It's a great event. And they're free, so just kind of lunchtime, easy tutorial type things that you might enjoy jumping in on. And then, of course, if you're interested in learning more about our education, we've got the bundle or our mentoring program. You're welcome to just book into my diary. There'll be a link below, and we can have a chat about how that might work for you. So I think episode 195, Bob, we're done and dusted.
Oh, 5 to go.
5 to go. Hit the big 200. That's exciting. Well, thank you for your time and thank you for listening. And we will catch you again next week.
Bye.
Bye.